So I'd really like to start with the gaming part of your resume with our audience today. So if you could just start with telling us what inspired you to get into the gaming industry and the purchase of the Sands.
Say that again?
If you can tell us what inspired you to get into the gaming industry with your purchase of the Sands in 1988 and the subsequent construction of this facility.
Okay. Actually, at that time I was in the trade show business.
Right.
And I had a vision for creating a show I called Comdex, which was an acronym for Computer Dealers Expo. And it grew exponentially, so fast. It quadrupled from the first year to the second year. Because the market for third-party distribution channel was exploding. And I sensed it was happening. And so I needed to find a piece of land because I knew the convention authorities typically, not just Nevada or Las Vegas, but typically they work very slow, the municipal authorities. So I decided that I would go and buy a piece of land and build my own exhibition center. So that's what I did. I looked for a property. I had to get an adjacent facility on which I could build meeting rooms like what we're in.
Sure.
So right now we're in a box of meeting rooms that up to here is about 10, and we build 330 meeting rooms. So I needed a hotel that had enough land to build a 1 million square foot convention center, which at that time turned out to be the largest convention center in the country. It was the first and only privately owned built. So I got into the business. So I had to buy the property. I had to get a gaming license and everything that went along with it.
So it was more about...
Which is what I did. It was more about getting the land for the convention center.
It was more about the convention business than gaming at that point.
At that point.
Okay. And of course...
Well, I've sort of reversed myself since then.
Of course, that was the first time the doubters came out of the closet. They said, "No,
the what?
The people who doubted you, who have."
No, that's not the first time.
Well,
it's happened.
I'm talking about.
It's happened to me dozens of times in my life.
In gaming, let's leave it.
In anything, in everything.
But
that's why my wife still has me on probation.
They doubted whether this would work here. They doubted whether your entry into Asia would work, and they've doubted almost every step you've taken along the way. Why do you believe that the people who doubt you were wrong, and how did you prove them wrong?
Why were they wrong? Because they guessed against me.
Right.
That should be clear. I'll have to go back a little bit in my lifetime. I've been in business for 69 years, since I was 12. And every time, well, after the first dozen or so businesses, I realized that the only way to get ahead was to do things differently than the way it was being done. And then I came to learn, which I finally learned at my ripe young age, that if you do things differently, success will follow you like your shadow. And you can't get rid of it. So that's what I did. So people doubted me because people just didn't do what I would do. It's a matter of finding out what it is that an industry does and identifying the opportunity as to how to do it differently. And then being enough of a risk taker to actually do it differently. So people doubted me because nobody thought of doing it the way that I did. And they were satisfied with the status quo, and I'm never satisfied with the status quo.
Well, let's talk about Asia. One of the things that happened in the beginning where the concessionaires were chosen, they all had some plans, but you had plans for a region in Macau called Cotai, which was just a marshland at that point. What did you see there that has now come into fruition today, where there's all these great facilities that are up and being constructed right now?
Well, if you looked at Las Vegas, and you had a couple of big helicopters with big slings, and you put it under the Strip, and you picked up the entire Strip with all of the properties abutting it, and bring it over to Asia, could you succeed? And the answer to me was yes. I mean, Steve and Caesars had made a career out of bringing in Asians, and they did very well at it. So it was clear that the Asian people loved to, as I call it, challenge luck. And so it was clear to me that if I just picked up Vegas, but I looked around, I couldn't find any big helicopters big enough to pick up the Strip, so I decided that I'll just reproduce the Strip the way it was built here over there. And that's what it's all about. When the government first gave me the piece of land, Macau is comprised of a peninsula, which is part of the mainland, and two very small islands, a very short distance away. The peninsula connected to one, and the one had only a causeway connected to the second. And the rest of the land was all water. It was a bay and a swamp. And I thought it was ideal. It was flat. There were no hills. So I could reproduce what I saw as the Strip. Flat, no hills. And all I had to do is, when the government sent me out there, I asked them, they said, well, this is going to be your permanent site. After they gave me what turned out to be the Sands Macau site. So I went out there and I looked at it and I said, and I couldn't find the land. So I went back to the government and I said, I thought for sure I was being exiled. For sure. They didn't want a guy to come out there, and so I could get in the middle of the peninsula where all the casinos were. There were only a couple. There were none in the second island. The first one there were two or three small ones in the first island. So I went back to the government and I said, well, you sent me out to what was called COTAI, an acronym of Colwyn and Taipa. And I said, I didn't find the land. I said, where's the land? They said, it's under the water. I said, what am I supposed to do? Take a pump and pump the water out or what? And they said, no, you bring in sand, you bring in barges of sand and you fill it in. I said, okay, I guess we can do that. My vision was to create Asia's Las Vegas, make a Strip. Now, it wasn't long enough. It was only from one island to the other. It was only 2.5 kilometers. And we couldn't measure in miles because their cars were in kilometers. They were metric cars. So I measured it by driving it. So what I met with an architectural land planning firm. And I laid out what turned out to be, because it wasn't long enough to equal this Strip, 20 lots. On this Strip, there's about 25 mega zones. 20 would be enough. And so I laid it out, I gave it to the government, they thought it was great. Of course, everybody thought I would fail. I got into a pissing match with Stanley Ho about, he thought I was going to fail, I thought he was going to fail, that we were going to put the peninsula out of business, it was going to be like downtown Las Vegas compared to the Strip, blah, blah, blah. We went back and forth. And I told him, I said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. So he put on an apron and he cooked pork and rice. And he gave out pork and rice to all his customers. It was a pretty funny scene. So I started to build. One of our competitors, the guy with whom we were originally supposed to share a license, Galaxy, the guy came up to me and he said, I ran into him one day while we were still talking, He doesn't want to talk to me anymore. And I said, well, when are you going to start? Because it's a whole long story, but we each got the same amount of land. There was 115 acres that we each got. And I picked the land on the strip, and he picked the land in back of the strip, to the west of the strip. And I said, when are you going to start? I don't see any construction going on. We opened in '07, it must have been '06, I said to him. He said, oh, I'm not going to do that. He said, first of all, I don't think you're going to succeed. But I'm going to wait till you take the risk and see whether or not you do succeed. If by some chance you do, by some luck, you succeed, then I'm going to build. But if you don't succeed, I'm not going to build. I said, okay. So he lost 3 years, 4 years. And then he opened, that was Galaxy.
I remember the first time we came to the opening of the hotel there, the Venetian, and his building was halfway up, and he had stopped construction. So he was still waiting then at that point for you to succeed.
Even after he started.
Right.
After we opened and he started, he kept on stopping.
Right.
I'd say all in all, he lost probably about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.